So without no further ado, let's put our hands together for the young man from London, Dwayne Fields. How you doing, bro? How you doing?
I'm not too bad, thank you.
Okay. You're planning to go. What did your mum say when you said you're going to the North Pole?
Okay, so this is really bad, but I haven't spoken to my mum for a long, long time. Yeah. So that's really bad. I don't know what she said, but I know my great aunt, she was like, do I have to, she asked me if she had to start praying for me because I think she thinks I was going mad or something. So I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to need your prayers. But in general, everyone was just really, at first they were like, you don't want to do it, you're going to die, you're going to lose bits and pieces, your finger's going to fall off, you're going to come back with 4 toes. And I was like, it's not about that, man. Yeah, and I remember this one day, it was like day 4, and I didn't really eat, I missed a meal or 2. And I started to suffer really badly because you're meant to be taking about 6,500, 7,000 calories, which is 3 times the amount that you probably need here. I suffered really badly for that 4th or 5th day, and it got to a point where I was like, you guys packed my poke wrong, I know you don't like me, and I started to make up these things, and a poke is the sled that I'm pulling, and it started to feel so heavy because I was so tired, and I was so certain that they'd added weight from their pokes to my poke, but the worst part is I packed my poke myself. But there's that, I mean, and the fact that I was starting to become almost irrational it was a really scary time for me because I was looking back and I was saying, oh, hold on, I did pack my poke myself. And then they'll do this other thing that was irritating as well. If you're with 3 people and 2 of them walk off, stop, talk for a minute, and just as you catch up, they walk off again. So that was so painful. So it was really hard for me. It was a really hard time, the first few days especially. What I did now, I went back to bed and I cried so long that I fell asleep, and it's only when my sister came in and said, oh, it's snowing. I was like, God, you couldn't tell me that this happens before. Like, I suffered, I was really scared, but I've never had any experience of snow prior to going to the North Pole. What I did was I went on a couple of trips to Norway, up in the mountain regions, which is bad, man, it's so cold. Like, has anyone here experienced minus 25 in a tent? No. In a tent. It is wicked. Like, it's bad. It's so cold. And I didn't want to be there. Yeah. So if you can imagine now, the first few days, the excitement was there, and I was really ready and up for it. By about 4 o'clock that afternoon, I was like, God, man, like, this walking's long. And plus, I was always looking around for the polar bear because I was always planning to see the polar bear first so I can run and leave them too, and it would be okay. And I remember day 6 as well, there was this really, really bad storm. It was literally a whiteout for about 48, 56 hours. And on that day, this was probably my lowest point of the whole trip. On that day, my fingers, my hands, my arms were so cold and numb, and my toes, I couldn't feel my toes. It normally takes us about 8 minutes to set up the tent and get inside and have a fire going. It took us about 25 minutes because I was holding one tent pole like this, and he was holding the other tent pole. And when we finally did get inside, trying to light the fire was just, it was really horrible. I held a match between those fingers, and he held the box, and I was striking it. And I started to feel like this is never going to work and we're going to die. But luckily we didn't. You can tell because I'm here.
That's right.
Yeah. And that was really, really bad for me. And I remember I went down on my knees at one point, just as we were trying to set up the tent. I was like, God, please, just like let the storm go away. And we got into the tent, and as soon as that fire started, man, I felt like, yes, all hope is back, and I've got hope again. I'm going to eat in a minute, and everything's going to be right with the world. And for me, that was the absolute lowest point. I've never felt anything like it. Here in the UK, when it gets cold and your fingertips get cold, what do? You go into, Costa Coffee or McDonald's, and you sit down for 5 minutes and you carry on. Out there, your fingertips get cold, and then they get numb, and then they go through another phase where they start to sting. It's where the nerves start to get cold, and it gets really deep inside, and then after that, your arms, the cold and the pain starts to spread. So it got up to about my shoulders, and I was in absolute agony. Just to do that was excruciating pain, and that was definitely my lowest point of the whole trip.
Were there any moments, I mean, you can tell us, we're all friends, you can share this with us.
Yeah.
Were there any moments where you actually cried in front of your mates? Tell us, bro.
Come on now. No. Do you mean my friends that I shared a tent with?
Yes.
No, the closest I came to crying was when I was moaning, you guys pat my poke wrong. And just every time I caught up, they'd walk off, and I stopped and I said, I'm not walking anymore because you keep walking off from me. Why don't you just spend a minute and ask me if I'm okay? And that was my like little moan, and after that I was fine. I mean, there was actually a point where one of my teammates cried.
Really?
Yeah, I was sharing a tent with a girl and another guy, which was all the more difficult. And the reason she cried was, I found an animal in the Arctic. I found an animal called a muskox. It's a buffalo, bison type animal. It was a baby one. It was walking through this really narrow valley one day. And I was always at the front. This was like day 5, day 6. I was always at the front because that's the only way I could avoid them. If I was at the front, I was looking forward. I didn't have to see them or hear them laughing or hear them talking. It was really irritating. And I'm walking, and I kind of stopped just to say, oh, guys, look, we're coming to the end of the valley. And just out the corner of my eye, I just saw this black, grey, brown thing up there, right maybe 25 feet up. And it was looking at me. I was like, oh, I'm going to die. It's a cougar. I don't know. I've never seen a cougar, but I was sure this was a cougar. And it looked at me, and it stayed still. And I was like, oh, it's a baby. And they were like, Dwayne, just leave it alone. We don't know where the mother is. I was like, no, I'm going to rescue it. And I rescue everything. I always think I'm rescuing stuff. I used to take pigeons, squirrels, anything I could find, I used to take it home because I was rescuing it from nature. I don't know. That's what I used to do. So I thought I was rescuing it. So I, made my way up there, and I was like, yeah, oh, I can see where it fell down. It's disturbed snow. That's my tracking coming into it now. There's the disturbed snow. So I kind of pushed him back up to the lip of the kind of cliff, and he ran back down, and then we both fell, and I named him Henry. It was only a few days old, and it stayed with me for 3 days. It stayed either on the left or the right of me. It didn't go to anyone else. And every now and then he would try and feed, but I was like, move, I can't feed you. I don't have those things to feed you. And when we had to leave him, you could hear him crying in the background, and that it played really heavy on me, and it really upset me. But
did you cry?
I did. Do you know? I'm going to share a story with you guys. Yeah.
Yes or no?
No, it's not a yes or no thing. It really impacted on me because when I was younger, I remember I was 4 years old, and I had this piglet. It was a baby piglet, and I had it. It was mine. Everywhere I went, this thing would follow me. Everywhere it was mine. A neighbor gave it to us. And I remember one day it died, and I remember crying for days, literally for days. And they'll tell you now, my family will tell you now, that I was like hysterical.
For a pig?
For a pig, man.
Okay.
Pigs are the best pets. And like, yeah, they're good. And I cried for days, and I remember just having Henry, I'm going to use his name because it brings him to life, I don't know. Having this little muskox there, I felt like, yeah, do you know what, this is hopeful. I was sure that him crying all the time because he was hungry was going to bring every polar bear down on us. But I weren't going to let him go. You can't just abandon something. So when he left and he was outside, we couldn't hear him anymore, it was really hard on me. So I started to remember all of that, and I was like, Dwayne, just stay focused. Don't cry in front of these two. Like, you don't know them like that. Don't cry. And then Linda just broke down. She said, oh, he's going to die. And then she broke down, and I started to feel a little bit like, oh, God. So I kept my goggles on so no one would see. But that was a really painful moment as well.
Fantastic. You've been to the North Pole.
Yes.
You came back. Mm-hmm. Was there any fanfare in this country? Did they celebrate your achievement?
It's really weird,
like
actually.
Andy Murray?
Oh, no, nothing like that. It's really weird because when I came back, there were some people waiting at the airport for me. I was like, oh, how did you know what flight I was on? It was a bit freaky. I was like, stalker or something. And they were waiting at the airport. They're like, oh, well done. And then I went to a radio station, spoke about the trip. I still stank. I didn't tell you guys. I smelled so bad. If you don't wash for 3.5 weeks, I don't know if anyone here has ever done it. Put your hand up if you've done it, yeah? I know no one's going to admit to something like that. If you don't wash for 3.5 weeks and you've been sweating and you just smell rotten. And I'll come back to your point. I'll tell you how I know I smelled. When you're starting to smell, you don't smell it. But when you leave your clothes in a room and you go and shower and you come back after half an hour, you will, man, the smell nearly knocked me out, man. I'm not even joking. Honest to God, it was the worst smell I've ever, I was like, that didn't come from me. Which one of you did something on the floor? And it was like that. And it was bad, so I stank. And I still felt like I smelled a little bit, because you know when you smell, you wash, and you think, oh, do I still smell? But I still smell. I felt sorry for everyone on the airplane. But yeah, so when I came back, it was really weird because I'd get phone calls and I'd get emails about, Dwayne, oh, well done, from people who I'd never met and people I didn't know. And one of them came from a lady that worked at Buckingham Palace, and it was strange because they were saying, oh, Dwayne, we've got an event coming up, and that's what she said. She says, we've got an event coming up we'd like to invite you to. Can we have an address to send the invite to? I was like, oh, I'll give them my work address. I don't want these strange people knocking my door. So I gave them my work address, and about 7 months later, this letter comes to work for me, and it was really weird as well, because my managers, it came to the workplace, but it was a signed letter, so someone had to sign and accept it. Someone accepted it, they gave it to my manager, and all three of them came around and said, Dwayne, can we have a word with you? I was like, yeah, just give me a minute. I'm going to be right there. Why are you looking at me like that? And I eventually got up and I went in there and they're like, do you know anything about a letter? And I work in a bank. I'm not going to tell you what bank, because I know some of us here will probably riot. But I work in a bank. So I was like, what letter? I don't know anything about any letter. I know I've done everything is above board. It's not me. Whatever it is, it's not me. They've got the wrong person. And I started to deny stuff that I didn't even do yet. And they were like, yeah, we all do that. Yeah. I started to deny. I was like, no, it wasn't me. I swear down, it wasn't me. God knows. And they said, well, there's a letter here for you, and it's got your name on it, and we're pretty sure it's yours. And I was like, well, can I see this letter? And I started to become frustrated. I was like, well, look, can I please see this letter? Because I don't know what's going on. And they put this letter down. It had like gold trimming, and it said, to Dwayne Fields, Esquire. I was like, oh, what's that? And I opened it, and it was like an invite to come and have dinner and stuff with the Queen. And actually, on that night, I met my biggest hero, Sir David Attenborough. And lovely guy, just so you know, lovely. It was about making a statement by saying, look, I'm not stereotypical, because what I found was I was being led down a path which, for me, it wasn't the path that was meant for me. I was born in one place, I came to another place, I learned to live here, I learned to survive here, and I survived by doing what everyone else did. And I wasn't happy, so for me it was about going back to what makes me happy and using that as a tool to encourage other people to be themselves, because around me, we were all fighting to, fit into this kind of image of what we should be as young men in and around Hackney. We were fitting into this image. We were wearing hoods, we were wearing hats. We'd stand on a corner for 4, 5, 6 hours. We'd literally stand there for that long doing nothing. We'd hang around in the estate opposite my house, and we would do nothing. And I started to fit into that stereotype, and I didn't want that. So for me to break out and publicly say, this is who I am, I couldn't just run a marathon. I'd run marathons or half marathons before. I'd do 10K runs and raise some money for charity. I did the 3 peaks before going. But for me, it was never enough. When I said to someone, oh, I'm going to go climb the 3 highest mountains in the UK, they were like, yeah, so. And I wanted to impact them to the point where they'd say, well, why? And ask me why. Because no one asked me why I ran the marathons. They said, oh, it's for charity. And that was it. So, oh, you did that 15K or you did that 10K run? Oh, yeah. How was it? It was hard. Oh, good. And that was it. So I wanted to do something that would impact and just have people questioning, ask that second question, why did you do it? And then I could just say, I did it because I wasn't happy with this, and I wasn't happy with the way things were going. I weren't happy with the way, individuals and my peers were growing and how they were changing, and the ideas that they had in their head. Because the ideas they had weren't their idea. It was the idea that was social. It was a collective idea. They wanted to grow up and be a footballer, which is a great idea if that's meant for you. But you can't grow up and be a footballer if you're not good at football. Like, I wasn't good at football. But you know what I mean? You can't grow up and be a musician if you're not talented in that way. You can always learn to play an instrument, but let's face it, somebody who's talented or has that talent, they have it from their 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. Other people, they can learn to do it, and they can do a good job, but it's never going to be your thing. It's never going to be you. It's never going to be what makes you different or what makes you fulfill your role or your purpose in life. For me, it was always about pushing the boundaries a little bit and being, I guess, just being out there, just being out in the wilderness, enjoying life for what it was for me. In regards to coming back, I remember the first day when I came back. When I landed at Heathrow, it was really bad because I felt so claustrophobic. And when I went back to Hackney, like all the streets, everything seemed so much smaller. I was inside the house and I was like, God, man, it's tiny in here. Even though I'd spent 4 weeks in a tent. The house was tiny. I went back to work and it was like, God, everything's so slow. And I felt safe, but that feeling of safety, I didn't like it. I almost wanted to feel like there could be a polar bear outside at any minute. And it was hard to get back to reality in that sense. And that's not why I'm going to the South Pole. The reason I'm going to the South Pole is simply because it's in me. It's been in me from day dot. When I was in Jamaica, I used to wander through the woods and try and get as close to the neighbors as I could. I was terrified of dogs. I could hear the dogs barking, but I'd push myself to take that extra step and that extra step. And for me, that was the adventurer inside me coming out, and I let that go when I was trying to please everyone else and be what everyone else was. So it was about finding that and just, rekindling that inside me. If something's worth doing, do it properly. I think that speaks for itself, man. If you're going to waste your time doing something half-heartedly, and if your heart's not in doing it, don't do it. Why would you kill yourself to do something if you're not going to do it properly? If you're going to, I don't know, if you're going to make a jacket and you're not going to make it properly, you're going to waste an hour and a half of your day making something that's going to fall apart, and you're going to have to then remake it. So you've doubled the time commitment that you've put into it. You've doubled your efforts of now. You've had to put a lot more in it. Do it properly the first time. It's done, and it's done for good. So if you're going to do it properly. Oh, desperate times call for desperate measures. Now, this one was a bit tricky for me. The reason I put this on in there was I was at a desperate stage in my life after that. The guy pulled the gun on me. I had a lot of pressure, people saying, let's get him. I know where we can get this to go and get him. Oh, we're backing you fully. And I felt desperate for change. And for me, going so far outside my comfort zone to decide to walk to the North Pole, that was a desperate measure to, rope myself back in and to gain the reins on myself. So for me, that's why this was in there, because I was in a desperate place, and my measure, which was desperate, was to walk away from it and civilization by going to the North Pole. Now, what this means to me is it's basically says, after all, we are setting a good example for our countrymen, if not by getting into tight situations, but by facing it like men. And I think sometimes when I look around, I feel like men aren't really men anymore. And I don't mean that in any kind of, disrespectful way or putting anybody down. But when I was younger, I remember a man he would make a decision, he would make the right decision for the right reasons. And I'm basing all of this on my great uncle. He would go out to work every morning, he'd come back in, and he would run the household. He would run it properly. He'd say, right, you kids go and do this. The reason you're doing it is because of this. And nowadays, it's like, you don't have that authority anymore, and men don't seem to want to take that responsibility anymore. And for me, it's about, whatever you're facing, face it like a man. If you're a woman, face it like a man, just face it, whatever it is. Just, if it's hard, don't complain about it. If it's something that's scary, face it, do it for the right reasons. And that's what this means to me. It doesn't mean, do it physically as a man, or do it because you're a male, or you're expected to, but just do it properly, and just do the right thing. Men, stand up, be men, be strong, make the right decisions for the right reasons. Actually, because people who you'd expect to ridicule the idea, or who I expected would ridicule me because of planning to do this, they're saluting me. They're like, I'll walk down the street, they're like, oh, Dwayne, how you doing, man? What's next? And it's like they're almost hungry for the next adventure. And I get asked 5, 6, 7 times a day, what's next? What's next? I go into schools, I talk to young people. I do a lot of work with young people at the moment, visit organizations, and there's always one young person, or maybe a group of them at the back, that seems so uninterested. They seem so distant from what you're doing. But the moment you go to leave and it's just you and them walking out, they always, and I promise you, I'm not lying, I promise you, they will tug my shoulder, Dwayne, so what? How'd you get into that kind of thing? And they're hungry for it. They crave just something different or new or odd, or just something that they might be able to own. So definitely a positive reaction from everybody I've come across.
Brilliant. In case you wondered, this Dalton Powell, our next An Evening With person will be this man in September. Incredible story to tell. One more. Oh, there's a lady at the front here, or in the middle, should I say? Oh.
Hi, you mentioned going to university. Was that a part of your change?
For me, going to university wasn't a part of my change. I started university in 2007, which just happened to coincide with me making a decision to go to the North Pole. Initially, I'll tell you how quickly things change. Initially, I was like, oh, I'm going to study psychology because I live by myself. I started to reflect on myself quite a lot. I wanted to study psychology. So I got into that, and a year later, I was like, do you know what? This isn't enough for me. I'm going to study international development as well. So I started to do that. And throughout the whole process of that, then I decided I'm going to the North Pole. And it's an idea that kind of, it changed and grew, but it always kind of stayed true to itself. So university, great. It wasn't a decision that I made because of this. It was just a decision that I made because I wanted to find out why I felt the way I felt and behaved the way I behaved about certain ideas. Like someone would say, oh, how's your dad? And immediately I'd be like, and I wanted to find out why I was like that, and I just wanted to know more about myself, to be honest.
Beautiful. Final question?
I've read about Sir Edmund Hillary.
Yes.
And some of the amazing things they've done, and Sir Ranulph Fiennes and that. And Sir Ranulph Fiennes' business card, if anybody knows, have you got a business card with Ranulph Fiennes' business card that says adventurer?
I'm going to show you
Best
something.
business
It's bad.
card I've ever seen.
You know what? I'm going to show you something, and I'm starting to sweat now because I'm nervous. It says DF, and on here it's embarrassing now because you've said it. It says Explorer. Sorry.
You've got to do it.
Come on, man. Why would you do it? It does say it. That's what it says there. Sorry.
And so you should.
But me and my brother there,
Yeah.
we're going to Alaska one day.
You're going to love it, man. You're going to love it. I mean, for me, the North Pole was one of the most beautiful. There was absolutely nothing. It would look like, I don't know if you remember the scene in The Matrix where it's just gone in, there's nothing. You can't tell where the ground or the sky starts. It's just, you're in a huge space, and it humbles you so much. You're like, wow, I'm so tiny. And it's an amazing place. It's the most beautiful place. When the light shines off the floor, it looks like you're walking across diamonds. And then I got sunburn inside my nostrils, which was interesting as well. That's what happens because you protect everything downwards, but then the sun beams up and it goes into your nut and you get sunburn and you breathe and it hurts. So yeah, that was good.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, listen, I'm going to have to say, wrap it all up because of the time. He's got to catch a train at 9:30. But let's show our appreciation for this wonderful man.
Thank you so much. Thank you. For me, the North Pole was one of the most beautiful. There was absolutely nothing. It would look like, I don't know if you remember the scene in The Matrix where it's just gone in, there's nothing. You can't tell where the ground or the sky starts. It's just, you're in a huge space and it humbles you so much. You're like, wow, I'm so tiny. And it's an amazing place. It's the most beautiful place. When the light shines off the floor, it looks like you're walking across diamonds. And then I got sunburn inside my nostrils, which was interesting as well. That's what happens because you protect everything downwards, but then the sun beams up and it goes into your nut and you get sunburn and you breathe and it hurts. So yeah, that was good.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, listen, I'm going to have to say, wrap it all up because of the time. He's got to catch a train at 9:30. But let's show our appreciation for this wonderful man.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Dwayne, two things before you go. We always get our guests to take pictures behind our board and then we put it onto the internet and publicize what we're doing. And secondly, sorry? Instagram, yes. This young man takes care of that side of things for us. And also, just to let you know that we didn't get a chance to arrange it, but we will be sending you a donation towards what you're doing.
Much appreciated.
No problem.
Thank you very much.
But I would prefer if you actually send it back to me and put it in my account.
Yeah. You shouldn't have said that out loud.
No, is this on? No, round of applause for Dwayne.
Thank you, man.